You guys don't understand. The T-Robot's a key part of my life.
The T-Robot is a key part of your life.
Integral to
We're watching James initiate the T-Robot.
T-Robot.
Sweet.
T minus T-Robot.
So you can learn a lot about a person by what they use to caffeinate themselves. So the philosophical question to begin is, how do you drink your coffee?
I drink tea.
The question is actually, do you drink your coffee correctly or with something in it?
That was implied.
There you go.
I drink mine very small, as in espresso.
You drink. Who only drinks espresso? I try to always try the espresso in a place, but usually it's terrible.
Yeah.
And then I go. My fallback is a latte.
You need you have to get the ristretto shot, man. Not
that doesn't help in places where they have terrible coffee.
Yeah, that's true. But I tend to drink everything in small glasses, I think.
I mean, if the coffee's decent, I might go to macchiato, right? But
you were suffering in Tokyo, Schaefer, because that you didn't find any good coffee. You were really grumpy about it in Tokyo.
I've lived in Seoul for a while. I know what it's like.
Do you remember that?
I do like some coffee.
The Chi robot is key. All you do is you put the robot basket right here, and then you tell it what kind of tea you want it to make, and then you push the tea button, and the tea robot's like, yo, I'm on that.
This turned into a YouTube video so fast.
It's like you can automate these tasks, Waters.
Is it a percolator? I mean, how does the water get into the tea, man?
Well, the key is that the robot arm is there, so it can time how long it's submerged. And then it's got a thermometer on the heat plate, so it knows exactly what temperature can make it between 175 and 212. And then other than that, you got time submerged and temperature, you got tea and lots of dimensions, then you push what flavor you want and it goes.
Your job is to put the loose tea in the little metal basket, which is on a ring in it. It's a tower with a magnetic, I don't know what you call it. It's like a
right. It's like a Bosch job. You just tell Bosch that I need this job, and it's like, how many do you want and what cloud do you want it on, and you're done.
You can tune it depending on what it's like. You want the oolong setting, and then the tea robot.
It's the tea in the basket.
Yeah.
No, it's actually really on topic for what we're working on this week. Unsi gave an awesome presentation to us on making Bosch jobs much more natively multi-cloud with less configuration, and making flavors and networks and all these other things much more abstracted to the users of Bosch. It's a major new set of work. We have 6 pairs on Bosch right now. So
good Lord. That's a serious investment.
Yeah, we're gonna go even higher. I think we might get up to 8 or 10 pairs on Bosch alone. So Bosch the world, it's like a T robot but for distributed systems.
Because Bosch is the platform.
Some have said. And I met Paulie this week, which was awesome.
Yeah, that was awesome, actually.
That was really fun.
Not enough time.
What'd you guys do?
Well, I accidentally made Paulie come way out of his way, but he was really generous about it.
He drug me out to this place by the airport I was pretty sure I was never going to make it out of.
Yeah, it would make perfect sense if he was headed to San Francisco airport afterwards. But unfortunately, he was headed to San Jose airport afterwards.
Which is where I drove up from, right? It's fine. No big deal. Great conversation, though.
Don't let Waters do that to you.
That's fun. I was actually trying to.
Yeah, his heart was in the right spot for sure.
I was trying to be by the airport.
Did you realize he was flying from the San Jose airport, or?
Well, no, Andrew. That's how it happened. That's the whole tragedy in the story, right? Romeo doesn't know that Juliet's actually still alive at the end of the play, or else he wouldn't have poisoned himself.
Yeah, it's like a Seinfeld episode.
So it's almost like you need more data before you make decisions and actions.
Well, I think where we broke down, honestly, was the communication, which is almost always where stuff like this breaks down.
Observation step. That's the worst one to miss.
That's right. Well, there was no feedback loop right? It's just
Once you had oriented to the wrong observation, there was no.
So we could start with a little OODA loop,
there you go.
the DevOps cap theorem debacle, if you will.
I think we should start with a little monologue by Paulie about what he's up to the extent he can talk about it, because I found it really interesting.
Yeah, I think.
Let's start there then.
Yeah, I think we had a great conversation over lunch, and you know, with about 15 different businesses that I'm working with right now, you know, they're all sort of facing different challenges, but certainly Cloud Founder, I think, can help in a couple of them where they're sort of struggling with, and this is not going to come as any real surprise, but the businesses that are trying to figure out how to integrate CI into sort of a legacy approach to software development and making that transformative sort of leap. And one of the big stumbling blocks is waiting for environments to be created. You know, a lot of developers are saying they're sending the request in to sort of the operations black hole, never to be heard from again, and they're starting to try and figure it out on their own. And with that many different businesses, though, I think a unified approach that allows us to create environments very quickly and almost sort of ephemerally, right? I think would be super powerful. There's just so much work to be done. You know, you have to sort of pick a foothold where we can start. Otherwise, it just feels like the mountain's too big.
Paulie, I know you've been on before, and you're practically a regular now. But why don't you introduce yourself to the people at home and give them a little context about yourself, your background, and
sure.
Maybe frame that project a little bit.
Sure. So I left Chef about 5 months ago to take up a new initiative with a company called Hearst, and Hearst is a holding company. They tend to buy other organizations and then help them to become successful. And so what they were looking for in me was someone to come along and work on transformational change, specifically with Agile, CI, CD, and things of that nature, like code coverage, sort of all the buzzword bingo stuff. But that's really on the development side, and then really looking at the ops folks and how they interact not only upstream but also downstream with the customer, things like releases and type feedback loops, those things we were just talking about. So that's sort of initiating the DevOps, right? But really, it's really full life cycle, full value stream, all the way from the business down to the consumer consuming a product or service.
So you're kind of a meta organization that's re-platforming a bunch of these portfolio companies?
So yeah, so if you think about it, it's really looking at, and I hate to use the word synergy, but it's sort of like trying to find ways that we can build a broader community across these businesses. Most of them are facing the same challenges, frankly. They just don't realize it. They feel very isolated. And you know how it is. If you're facing something particularly tough and stressful and scary, so a lot of times you tend to think you're the only one who's either facing it right now or has ever faced it, or maybe your challenges are so unique that there's no way that I could learn from someone else or share this.
It's the snowflake effect.
Yeah. And you know what? Each snowflake is unique, but if you think about it, they're all just frozen water, right? So there are commonalities at the base level that you can take and leverage and build upon, and then let it branch where it needs to.
I think you're hitting on something really important there. I've hit it every time I've been in a situation where there was this need for some sort of transformation, because, of course, you know, agile transformation or whatever you want to call it is not the only one. You know, if someone needs to move from old thing to new common thing, and it's inevitably the move to something that's shared that triggers this response, it isn't always that people are sort of overwhelmed by it. In some cases, they're very proud of what they've got, and so it's very important for them to sort of, to their identity, that this be seen as something unique, right? The idea that you could have built a platform that actually allowed them to run on it would imply that they're not as special as they thought, right? So
right, and honestly, you know, a lot of people tend to look at it and say, what we have is working. Which is actually absolutely true. And if it wasn't working, the business would have either gone under or would at least be suffering. And certainly Hearst would never have purchased them and dumped money into them if they didn't believe in them. I think there's a difference between being proud of what got us here and looking at what will get us there. And you're right. You definitely don't want to dump on someone or call their baby ugly, or right. And the idea is that the hard work and the effort and the dedication that got that company to the point where another company believed in them so much and their product and their people and their customers that they purchase them and want to put capital into them. That, I mean, that says something, right? And so what you want to do, though, is build on that and say, you know, we need to now take the next leap forward. In my experience, where people tend to fail and get really disenfranchised with something like Agile and decide to, you know, kind of give up on that, is they tend to, for whatever reason, tackle, they're like, what is the hardest thing we have? Let's tackle that first. And while it may add the most value right out of the gate, that's not really, it's not a good way to build, right? That's like saying, let's build the whole building now, starting with floors 1 through 10, and not really focusing on foundational things.
And you know, honestly, I see that as well all the time too. So you're hitting like the best points from my perspective on this, and that's that. It's really easy to do the extremes, right? Where you do a toy app that actually doesn't tell you anything, or you do some gigantic impossible project, right? Like the hardest thing you can do. And both of those don't actually result in success. One, you don't learn enough to say that you've actually made progress, and the other one is almost certain to fail because there's too many challenges.
I think I want to point out one of those challenges, which is, and it kind of goes to the social aspect of this, all the detractors that don't want to change, that don't want you to succeed, are going to be able to take every little minor failure and magnify it as you go forward. So you kind of got to pick things that prove enough of the point that you can win and get this momentum. But if you go, it's you know, the Machiavelli quote that I throw back and forth. What's the hardest thing to do? What does Machiavelli say is the hardest thing?
Introduce a new order of things.
To introduce a new order of things, exactly. And why is it hard, James?
Because my tea's done. Oh,
the tea robot has succeeded in its mission.
I've flashed that Machiavelli quote to Mark Andreessen. That's why he followed me one day on Twitter. Because he's like talking about stuff like he had just invented it. I'm like, dude, you're just quoting Machiavelli and don't even know it. Like, this is all settled in 1530.
Yeah. You're almost talking like it's an echo chamber. Anywho.
The reason it's hard is because the people that benefit from the old order will face you with all of their fury and might, and you only have lukewarm support from the people who might benefit from the new.
Right.
So you have to an uphill climb, and you might as well pick battles you can win before you go all in.
Can we acknowledge that Matt Stein,
he comes in looking like original gangster.
He comes in with a backwards lid, like he's
so relaxed, so relaxed.
I'm pretty sure he's not home, or he wouldn't be on.
Look how chill he is.
I am at home.
You are? Oh my God.
Chill.
This is
where's the wife?
The soothing tone of Matt Stein. I am indeed at home.
I just thought I'd pop in because I released some software a few minutes ago.
It was awesome.
No big deal.
Thought this would be the place to announce that the Spring Cloud Services beta finally just went out the door.
That is huge. Huge. Nice work, Stein.
I mean, literally like 2 minutes before After Dark started.
We saw the tweet. We saw it.
It's alive.
So, Matt, you know what else? Sorry, I'm kind of coming back in stream, but I had to get my tea.
I understand.
You know what Ryan Morgan showed me that most people don't know?
What's that?
Do you know how many people signed external CLAs to contribute to Spring Cloud just in the last week? Like 12 people quietly signed up to start contributing to it externally, including IBM.
So we're starting a new wave.
It's a whole new wave. I actually had a fascinating conversation with, I met just earlier today at the Wonders of Soma. A lot of people in tech are here. The founder of GitLab, which is actually a pretty cool company that I'm definitely going to keep an eye on.
Yeah.
And he's got already 100,000 deployments at GitLab. It was kind of like the low end, and they're kind of coming up. And I was explaining to him how important things like Spring Boot were to enterprise change in terms of really doing CI/CD. Because I said as long as the WebSphere or WebLogic admin is standing there as the gate to any deploy and you can't get a hold of them, like you can do all of the kind of DevOps rah that you want, but unless you can deploy to WebLogic or WebSphere with the WAS admin, you're done. And that's why.
None shall pass.
No, it's like they're like the beavers of enterprise deployments. They love clogging it up. So, I showed them the growth of Spring Boot broke 1.2 million downloads this last month. I said, you didn't know it, but that's actually fundamental to your CI/CD kind of culture in enterprises is lighter weight Java containers that don't require an expert to do once every 6-month deployment. So I think Spring Cloud's huge.
Stein, this software you just released, what does someone have to do to use it?
Well, actually, can we start from what it does?
Yeah, that would probably be interesting.
Let's talk about that.
So yeah, so basically, Spring Cloud that we've been talking about has been around for, I guess, a little over a year now. I guess we first announced it at Spring 1 last year. And one of the many things that it does is take a lot of the Netflix components that they've used to build their architectures and wraps them in Spring programming model abstraction. And we're doing other stacks as well. So a project that we actually just, I guess, put out a first release candidate for is Spring Cloud Console that takes, the HashiCorp version of this story and creates the same wrapper around it. So really what we've done is this abstraction layer around some of the common patterns in distributed systems and then created a Netflix implementation of that. We now have a console implementation of that. We just had someone in the community contribute a Zookeeper implementation of some of this functionality. So we take that, and there are some server-side component pieces, and there are some client-side component pieces. We take the server-side pieces like the service registry for doing service discovery, the config management server for doing distributed config management across app instances, and then the dashboard for aggregating circuit breaker metrics when you're using the circuit breaker pattern in your apps. And we put those into the Cloud Foundry marketplace. So were you to download the tile from Pivotal Network and install it through Ops Manager, you now get 3 new services in the marketplace that you can create. And then you take your Spring Boot app, you add the Spring Cloud libraries to your class path, whether you're using Maven or Gradle or your build tool Poison of choice. And a new library that we also just launched that is an extension to the Spring Cloud connectors that folks have been using for a while now to connect their Java apps to Cloud Foundry services. We have the auto configuration such that once you bind your Spring Cloud boot app to one of the services you've created in the marketplace, then it will automatically pick that up and start participating in that particular pattern.
So let's get specific.
Okay.
That was pretty specific.
Let's get specific on
He
the
wants to go
customers.
deeper, James.
I want to talk about the customers.
Okay.
I'm a customer. What does this mean? How hard is it, or how easy is it for me, who is faced with the daunting task of deploying a cloud-native microservice architecture on Cloud Foundry, right? It's non-trivial. Everyone wants to do it. A lot of people don't really know what to do. What part of the heavy lifting does this take care of?
You still have, it gave you more Legos, basically.
I'm not asking you, Schaefer.
No, I'm going to take a little bit of it, and then we can go back to Stein. Because I think one of the things that's worth pointing out here is that you have the open source Spring Cloud that's been there, and people can use it, and it has a lot of these, especially the client-side annotations. But what Stein's been doing and what they released today is actually running the server side as a managed, as a service, quote unquote, as a service inside of Cloud Foundry. And that's the added value there. You could always go and grab these open source components and use them in your code, but you would be on the hook to then do the rest of the deployment and manage those services.
And that's awesome, but I want to know, as a user of this, as a developer, faced with the daunting task of deploying a cloud native architecture for this critical app for my enterprise. What does this mean for me?
Well, the biggest use case that we had people asking us, how in the world do I do this, for months leading up to Spring Cloud starting as a project, and then the services release is, okay, you've told me decompose my app into X number of services. Okay, great. How in the world do I actually glue all that back together and get them talking to each other? So
what are the challenges in building a cloud native app, right? I need service discovery.
Yeah.
I need integrated load balancing.
Yeah.
Right.
I need to find out where everything is, and then once I know where it is, I need to decide, okay, which of the addresses that I just figured out where this logical foo service that I want to talk to, it's at these 10 locations. Which of the 10 do I choose, and how do I load balance across them? So the best we had going into this was, okay, go create a bunch of user-provided service instances for all these things that you've just deployed, and then bind them all to your app. But oh wait, as soon as you move it, you're going to have to recreate those and rebind them. And this was kind of it would work, but it was pretty bad from a management solution. And as soon as you got beyond 2 or 3 apps, it quickly became untenable. You want a more dynamic registration-based solution where, as services are coming up, they announce their availability to this thing. In this case, that thing is Eureka, but it could be something else. And then the clients come in and say, okay, tell me where all the foos are, and says, okay, as of right now, this is where they are. Do with that information what you want. So to participate in that now, you CF, create service registry, bind your app to it, and then you go into your code and you add a single annotation to your app, enable discovery client, and you are now participating in that pattern. And you can inject an instance of this discovery client bean into your code and start asking it, hey, where's the foo service? And it will tell you. And then you can layer on top of that more complex load balancing. Say, oh, use this load balancing algorithm to choose across the available instances of this thing that you know about.
You went from needing to go into the forest to chop down trees and make your log cabin to having a lumber store, basically.
Yeah.
So you can frame your house with 2x4s that someone else used, and they happen to be milled at Netflix.
Right. There you go.
I think that's exciting. I'm surprised by the number of people that are already using at least Hystrix or some of the components everywhere I go. I've never seen anything grow quite as fast as Spring Cloud in terms of high-end enterprise companies using it, so I'm pretty pumped.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it because cloud native architectures are hard, and people are rightfully excited about those sorts of architectures and about the tools that came out of Netflix and other places to make those things possible. But as anyone who uses a PaaS will tell you, just because the things are possible doesn't mean that they're easy until you get a PaaS. And this sort of stuff says, hey, this is cloud native architecture PaaS essentially.
Yep.
What is easy gets to move up the stack, basically.
That's right. We're moving easy up the stack.
Well, I think that's really what Cloud Foundry is about to me. Is it's the packaging of like modern distributed applications delivered in an agile way, over and over and over again, no matter what changes. It's not like we have one opinion of what the world looks like forever. It's like whatever that community tells us they need, whatever Pauly tells me he needs, to help people at Hearst, that's what's going to happen. I think that's an important thing, is that we're dynamic and we bring in the best of the best over time.
I'm going to use that to tie those two threads back together, the question of sort of picking the right entry point for that transformation. What do you tackle as that first challenge? And certainly a lot of it is cultural, but a lot of it is actually also the set of tools that you have available, right? That in many ways constrains what's difficult and what's easy. And having tools this powerful means that the sort of the circle of stuff that you can tackle is that initial project and actually expect to be successful is much larger, right? It significantly improves the opportunity to change that culture, right?
Tools
And
inform process.
tools inform process. There you go.
Yeah, I mean, like it or not, those are the underpinnings of your culture, right? Those are the enablers.
Well, it's feedback on itself.
Yeah, I mean, it's symbiotic, right? I mean, as much as and by the way, I love to just go ahead and, you know, kind of trash tools sometimes, even though I came from a tooling company, specifically around tools are the easiest thing to rip and replace. But a good tool with a great process, that creates a workflow, and those things people become very emotionally attached to, and it's very empowering.
So what's next for you, Matt? This is a beta release. That's pretty awesome. Everyone should check it out.
Yeah, so we have a bunch of housekeeping tasks that we're doing to take this thing from a beta release to a 1.0. Just a bunch of little boxes that each of them are fairly small, but checked together end up being a decent chunk of work. We're also going to add one more service to the suite, which is the cloud management bus service. And basically what that does is levels up the config management service to where not only can you version and distribute your configuration across several app instances, but then as you go and update that configuration in Git, you can inform applications, hey, there is new configuration available, go update yourself and refresh any services internal to you that would need to consume this new configuration. So if you wanted to do something like tune connections in a connection pool and you don't want to actually roll the entire suite of app instances, you can do that. Or if you want to raise or lower log levels so that you can troubleshoot a problem, or getting into the patterns if you want to do something like, hey, I want to force this circuit breaker open even though the service on the other side of it is healthy. I want to actually see how is my app going to behave when I force the circuit breaker open.
These are operational inputs that come from version control. That's an interesting paradigm.
Yeah.
Right? We should talk about that a little bit.
Because it's also interesting in the context of a platform, because then the platform, there's things that are affecting the live apps outside of the platform in a sense, or symbiotic with the platform. But
no, I think config server is actually an interesting stretch for us to say, well, I thought we owned lifecycle, but now there's a whole set of lifecycle things happening at the Java config level. And Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, some of these use Java's ability to do sort of like more online changes as opposed to having to completely roll to reconfigure.
Well, yeah, I mean, Java's had management extensions for a long time, where you could go into your app server at the time, and there would be this big, ugly console of all of these different Java objects that expose different properties that you can either change values or you can turn things on or off. But the problem with that is that there was really no concept of who changed what and when and why it changed. You would basically protect this massive console with some form of authentication, but once you're in the door, it's very difficult, and the servers just did not provide good tools.
It kind of makes you want to lock everything down and not let anyone change it.
Exactly. Don't go touch this stuff because you're going to break something. So now, you have the ability to, version control systems are really good at telling me exactly what changed, who changed it, when it changed, why it changed. So if you take that and you couple it with a service that can deliver that information, and then again, based on auditable API calls, I can say, take this new set of config based on this git SHA and push that out to these app instances, and then record that, and I say, okay, this configuration set has now been applied across these running app instances, and I can trace back from when the button was pushed to the git commit that says, here's the config set that was changed. It's a pretty powerful tool in terms of A, managing that stuff, but B, also being able to, when you want to and when you think you have a legitimate use case, to actually push configuration changes out live as opposed to going through the full rolling recycle. Because sometimes if you're trying to troubleshoot a problem and you actually recycle the app server, the problem goes away and it doesn't come back for minutes or hours. And so you kind of have this whole Heisenberg problem that once you start messing around in there, you actually remove the problem, and so you kind of have to find a way to get visibility into what's going on without actually changing the system itself.
So we kind of talked about this but not in an enumeration. What's actually packaged, like each specific Netflix project in the new release?
What's packaged right now?
In the whatever we just released, what's in it?
Yeah, so what's in it right now is the config server, where you can point at a Git or a Subversion repository and deliver up that configuration to apps. Then you've got the service registry that's based on Eureka, and then you have the circuit breaker dashboard for Hystrix that packages up Turbine for aggregating all of the event streams coming out of the apps, and then the dashboard itself with the the pretty graph widgets and everything that displays the response time buckets and the requests per second profile and number of successful and failed and short-circuited things, that stuff. Not get some screencast out the door soonish.
I think what's really cool about this is that there are a lot of, Paulie was talking about this, there are a lot of concerns that we solve that teams have already kind of solved, and we solve 200, 300, 500% better. But it's kind of a painful, discussion with them sometimes to benchmark against that. What's cool about Spring Cloud to me is that we're solving these things before anyone else has figured out how to deploy them at all. And so there's an opportunity to introduce both the basic deployment model as well as our advanced deployment model all at the same time, and it gives people I've seen a much higher excuse rate to say, oh, well, we haven't solved that yet at all, it's more of a greenfield operational concern for us, we'll just go with Cloud Foundry. So it's interesting, even though we're equally better at the basic use cases, how this has been really powerful for people from a perception perspective.
What I love about it is it gives people more of a concrete example of how these things can be put together so they can reimagine their new architecture, instead of trying to figure out how they're going to ad hoc automation to try to cobble together their legacy architecture in the cloud.
That's pretty big. Thank you, Matt. That's huge.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yep, you're welcome.
Yeah, Paulie, I know when I talked to you, you were sort of ambivalent on language, and we're totally happy to be ambivalent on language, but we meet a lot of Java shops because that's the easiest skill to hire right now.
Yeah, we'll end up there too, more than likely. At least we're there already in some respects, and maybe moving more there in the future. And like I said over lunch, I'm all for if you want to try a language, I'm really big on trying to squash ontological arrogance and stop people from the snark right out of the gate, because it really kills people's motivation and innovation. If somebody wants to do something in a crazy language, go for it. If you can show me that it works and will scale, and so we talked about before, I can actually find people to work on it, which is the next problem, is just because you did something in a language and it worked and was awesome, you may be the only one doing it and the only one interested in it.
Erlang.
Right. Well, it just creates an issue of manpower, right? Or just finding qualified people that would be interested in joining the project. And so
we have RabbitMQ, so I live with this. It's in Erlang.
Yeah.
It's developed in London. And so we're like, hey, how many Erlang experts in London can we hire? How fast? When you get further on the tail of languages, I know Ben's a big fan of Erlang, but it is a real concern.
Well, it speaks completely to scalability, but on a different level, right? So we're not talking about technological scalability. We're talking about the business being able to scale. If it takes off and we need to continue to build on what you've created, maybe you create your own. Maybe you don't have that luxury of time and resources. You just need to be able to go out and find a pool of people.
That's why I think microservices or microservice-style Java is such a big change, because before all the other little dynamic languages kind of gnawing on the edges of the market, And if the core enterprise Java dev starts thinking about continuously deployed microservices now, that really blows the doors off and keeps it from being a micro segment to being a major change.
I don't want to spin out on this too much, but in a sense, it's kind of ironic that you went and played the Erlang card, because Erlang is very much the original microservices framework.
Does it do IPC well? I heard.
Well, there's certainly things that could do better. How about string manipulation? But
just open a socket.
But at the end of the day, like a lot of what we're doing, if we're being honest, with microservice deployments, is rebuilding features of Erlang.
Yeah, that's a fair statement.
But here we are. This is fine.
It's all iterative, man.
Are you going back for? You're doubling up on the tea. Where'd Waters go?
Yeah, I need one more cup, guys.
He's getting ready for Cloud Foundry at dawn.
Do you realize what this is right here? This is Cloud Foundry 2011 launch day OG T-shirt. How many of you guys have this in your dressers?
Not me.
Yeah, I got the next year one from VMworld.
I got the brand new Pivotal shirt
That you made.
that I made.
Hey, so there was cool stuff that happened in Bosch this week that Dimitri's planning. I'm sorry he's not on. We should have Dimitri come on next week and give us the updated Bosch plan. You guys want to hear a little bit of the sketch around some of the work that they're doing?
Sure.
So, many folks may have not actually used Bosch. Stein has. He's been a developer on it. Stein, do you want to stop? Oh, he's dropping off. Okay. The thing I was saying, like today, Bosch, you specify everything about your job right in the manifest. So you'll talk about the network, you'll talk about the VM size. Like it's very, you might say verbose, or you can get very specific, I guess is the positive thing. And then Bosch will go ahead and implement that on multiple clouds for you.
Bosch is based on specificity. You specify everything.
Yeah, but that leaves a lot on the operator to remember things like network address spaces and which address spaces can be used by what jobs when, and it leaves it to be a bit manual. And so that means that automating Bosch in terms of, hey, I'm just a little service broker and I want to call Bosch to create me a new cluster. I've got to do a lot of that IP address and instance type management myself. And so they're working, and availability zones are the same way. You have to hand configure those into Bosch. They're not first-class citizens. So we're making a big investment right now to start to make those things that are more baked into Bosch, and that you could write a release, a manifest for a job that just has a basic description of the job without having to be as detailed in the networking, the instance types, availability zones, etc. So we're really raising the bar in those abstractions, which will, I think, be really important in the history of Bosch. And really great work being done by Dimitri right now, who was a developer on Bosch for a year and who now is sort of the architect PM. So it's deeper in the bowels, but it's really exciting to me. And we should have him come on next week and give a detailed presentation on it.
So improving the abstractions and the accounting so that tool takes care of that for you instead of forcing you to do it.
Yeah, and what it does is it allows you to treat it more as an API over time and less as a complete cluster config tool that you bring all of the knowledge to. So you can make more higher abstraction requests to it in a predictable way.
It also lets you do more, because of the abstraction being built into the tool, more across different clouds without you some of those things bleed into the manifest if you're moving from Amazon to vSphere, that kind of stuff.
That's right. If you've ever cut a services release for Bosch right now, like the MySQL cluster for Amazon is different than the manifest for vSphere and it's different than for OpenStack because the way it treats flavors and VM sizes are different between those clouds, and right now that's all hand configured. And so it's pretty cool that we're going to start to be abstract that up a level and make it even more modifiable in a rapid way. I'm pretty pumped about what that can mean for the ecosystem, and it's going to be a big usability change. I always like to joke that Bosch was by Vadim for Vadim. I mean, he's one of the engineers that wrote it, and it was easy for him. And I think we've just been waiting to take the power that it has and make it easy for, say, someone like myself to just jump in and quickly get what I need to get done. So
I'm extremely excited to see very usable Bosch, and I think it will change the dynamics of the whole community.
yeah, and the other simplification there over time is the potential to use VMware Photon OS as the embedded OS that's even lighter weight and smaller than the Ubuntu stem cell we have today, and certified in even more enterprises over time. So I think you put those two things together, it's sort of a Bosch 2.0, 3.0 coming up.
So then the stem cell is the VMs that Bosch manipulates, and it's really just providing the kernel. Like that's its main job anyway. So
Yep.
Let's do that.
Yeah, exactly. So I think next week we'll make sure to have Dimitri give us a walkthrough of all of his plans. But we're making a very material investment there. And even shout out to EMC, they've hired 4 full-time engineers to contribute to the project on top of what Pivotal's doing on Bosch. So it could be a 20-person team by the end of the year, which for a one system is pretty big for us.
It's like a what level of funding of startup is that in San Francisco these days?
Don't even know. Hey Ben, do you want to talk about what we should do with Git and things like GitLab? Do you want to give your thesis on that?
I don't know, do we?
Up to you.
I mean, I don't think it's too radical to say that a big part of the value, maybe the main part of the value for a PaaS is that it provides an integrated experience for building, deploying, and operating applications at scale. And in that vein, looking at the whole application lifecycle as within the purview of a PaaS, because that's the full developer experience, right? What is everything that a developer has to touch? What are all the tools that they rely on in order to do that build, deploy, and operate? And from that, what needs to be in Cloud Foundry? And if you look at the major tools that are essential to doing that work, you need source control. So that GitLab conversation gets very interesting.
You know what's cool about them, just to interject real quickly?
Yeah, get on it.
They're all open source. So they're on-prem and they're 100%, they're all open source except for one of their LDAP extensions is all open source. So everyone in the community can just jump in and submit pull requests to however they want issues. And I hadn't even gotten my mind around that, but GitHub is obviously not open source at all. So it's interesting to think about that competitive dynamic. Please proceed, but that was pretty fun to think.
No, that's interesting. Honestly, less interesting to me, the competitive aspect than the integration aspect. That GitLab has proven itself, I think, as a really valuable tool to folks who want an on-prem source control story that feels like something much more polished, like you might get with GitHub. But because it is much smaller, much more open, it's feasible for us to then integrate it more tightly in, so we could have a great story where there's the existing stuff around Cloud Foundry really running those apps, but we can also integrate Concourse, right, our CI system, which is pretty fantastic, and people should check it out. As that matures, you should expect to see it show up in CF. Similarly, we want something like GitLab that allows us to do source control. My dream is that we integrate issue tracking and project management tools as well, since that's really all part of the system.
All of it, the full solution.
But what I want to hear is from Pauly, is if he really thinks he could walk in with like this, dare I say, more monolithic, complete solution. Like, he's the consumer for this, so I'd love to just market test it against his intuitions. Would you like a turnkey out-of-the-box thing, or does your team want to pick different things at different points in that layer cake, Pauly?
Yeah, part of the problem there, at least for me, is specifically around getting consensus on anything is virtually impossible, which is one of the nice things of a tool chain is it gives an opportunity for a lot of input and feedback and movement. there's no single tool that's going to solve, or I shouldn't say solve rather, but satiate like everyone on the team, right? There's always going to be at least one or two folks that are like, why are we using?
You know what? That's the nature of opinions. You're
Right.
absolutely right. I would say, much like easy moves up the stack, the rest of this needs to move up the stack as well.
The
right?
coefficient of bike shedding is constant.
Yeah.
I think that's
Consensus also needs to move up the stack, right?
Yeah.
Meaning the points of conflict need to not be down in this infrastructure. It's just not relevant, right? I want to make a distinction here between we have opinions and we encode them in the software that we ship, right? In the sense that all the components are there for you to use and they work out of the box. They're integrated with everything else that's there. As is currently the case with Cloud Foundry, and which will be the way it is for quite a long time, I'm sure. That doesn't mean that you can't use something else in one of those roles,
Right.
but it is off the happy path, right? You're very
Yeah.
I think the way I would frame it, and maybe this isn't a perfect metaphor, but I like using my iPhone. I do not use Apple Maps. It's a very nice integrated, maybe not the best of every piece of hardware, but it's a pretty good user experience. It seems to have done them pretty good from a market cap perspective. But I'm not going to use Apple Maps, and I really like using Google Maps. And
No, I think it's a great analogy, and I also think that a lot of times people have sort of bad taste in their mouths from organizations that put out a product that claim to be a black box. And then
that's a very important consideration, right? Is the mapping from what I'm talking about into your world, I think captured really well, right? Which is, I say it's fully integrated, and what you hear is it's a black box.
Yeah.
Right?
Or, oh, great, it's SharePoint.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So
I'm not kidding, right? I mean, that's the sort of.
I know. As someone who was required by paycheck to consume SharePoint, I can assure you, I feel that pain. I think that there's a huge, installed base of mindset that that sort of integration is a trap. But I would also say that that's something that we face in general with Cloud Foundry, right? Is people are terrified of that darned lock-in, right? But it turns out that it's not real.
Yeah, and you know what? That's not a reason to not do it, right? I mean, the thing is, if you're able to do it and actually add value, there are plenty of products that do offer a suite of solutions that actually work quite well, and people love them. Not everyone, of course, right? I mean, Atlassian has a suite of products that I know a lot of organizations swear by,
Right.
and a lot of don't like it, right? But the point is that if
I'm more in the swear at Atlassian camp.
Actually, you know what? I thought, Jira and Confluence and Greenhopper, back when it was called Greenhopper, was actually fine to use, but was a nightmare to manage.
Yeah.
But yeah, so again, that's not a reason to abandon it, right? I think it's a great idea, and if you can do it, it integrates the tool chain. And to James's point, if you can come in and add value right out of the gate, right, and you build on that, it's a flywheel, and then it's not lock-in. In fact, as long as you don't preach that, people won't necessarily believe it. People tend to believe, in my opinion and experience, people who are really intelligent and innovative look at it as an open system that they can take and plug in where they need to plug in.
I think that that's exactly right, and I come at it from sort of the other direction and say, Pivotal shows up and they say, here's, in our opinion, the right way to do a bunch of things around building and delivering software, right? And there again, you can agree or disagree with any of those opinions, but they do form this coherent whole of this is how you deliver software and how you operate it, right? And I think that in a sense we're letting customers down because we show up and we say, here's the whole set of opinions that you should be implementing, and here are tools to do a couple of them. Good luck, right? And I want to be able to show up and say, here is a cohesive process, a cohesive set of opinions around building, delivering, and operating software. And here is everything you need to do that. You may choose to go do any part of it another way, but if you take what we give you, you will absolutely have a great experience around all those things.
I mean, the alternative and what we're kind of faced with right now is you can't drive the car off the lot, right? So it's like we tell you we're going to transform your business, and we have all these pieces, and we actually do have many of those pieces. But then we're like, oh, but you got to use the screwdriver to connect this other thing, and then you're going to be able to drive home. And I would just want to be able to get them the car, and like they can take it on the freeway and be off with it.
Yeah, no assembly required, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, so Paulie, it'd be great to get your opinions on GitLab. I think I'm going to be talking to them more about how we do integrations, and part of the thing I talked about with their CEO, Sid, was the ability to say, here's an issue, here's a commit, here's the deployment, here's the performance, and maybe even the dream world where you have a commit and the whole way through to dummy traffic and see what the metrics on it look like. Kind of as I think that's some of the unique value of end-to-end, where it's not just glued together, but it's formed into value. I think that's somewhat interesting.
Yeah, definitely. Keep me in the loop. I'd really like to know how that goes.
Yeah, I'm just experimenting on that front, and I see the value in what Ben's saying, but I also think, when I look at our engineering team, we've used maybe 5 or 6 different CI systems since I've been on the project, maybe 7. And so I do see there is some thrash there and a lot of rapid change of preferences too.
But I mean, is that churn, do you see it as an iterative process moving closer to the goal, or just churn for the sake of churn because
we ultimately wrote our own?
Yeah.
Can I suggest a reason for that? Because
sure,
I
I'd love to
think
hear.
a lot of places go through that. A lot of places go through that and are still doing it, right? And I think that a lot of that dissatisfaction is not in the CI tool. It's that the CI tool has to be a part of this whole chain, a part of this whole stack, and they're universally built in isolation. And when you take that thing that's been built in isolation and try and shove it into the middle of this whole process, something doesn't work right, right? And if that's what you have to use all day, it's going to drive you nuts. And so you're going to be constantly hunting for the one true CI that will make it okay, right? But it turns out that in order to build that, in my opinion, that one true CI has to be built into all the rest of that process.
I'm gonna take it a step farther, because I think everything you said is true, but there's other things that are going on here, which is that the generation of CI tools that most people have adopted, and kind of anything before Concourse, in my opinion, was spawned in a time before the types of architectures that we're really talking about, and they're CI to build monoliths. And so when you get to the point where you're trying to build these complicated dependencies and chains and pipelines, it's very, very difficult to bring those into those tools, and that's accounting for a lot of that churn as well.
It's an excellent point.
Yeah, we jump through hoops for that with our CI solution, man. It's very difficult to arrange true integration.
Where did you land up?
What do you mean, like what tool are we using?
Yeah, what are you using now, and what do you think of it?
Yeah, I'm going to be on the spot here. What is it called? Circle CI. There it is.
Okay.
Circle CI, I think that it's a lot better than nothing, and it's nice to have it like deeply integrated into our software lifecycle, where it's publishing the bits that we deploy. And I think that as we are adopting a microservice architecture, I mean, just like you're talking about here, like the cracks in it really begin to show. You end up having to spin up many instances to chat with one another to be sure that true integration is happening, and it's totally possible, and we're doing it. We've got one that's like 6 components working together at the same time right now, but like there is a member on our team who lost a good bit of hair getting that set up.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately the process that drove the development of Concourse, is recognizing that there's a way to model this and make those pipelines and distributed pieces of those architectures a little more flexibly independent, because what you're essentially forced to do in the previous generations of tools is for anything you want to run, you kind of have to model it all at once. And Concourse gives you a nice way to break down the pieces and map them into something that you can consume mentally bit by bit and make sense of.
Yeah, that's very true. And Ed, don't worry too much about it. I mean, most of the people I dated in high school said, it was better than nothing. So, and I don't take it as that big an insult.
Yeah, I probably should watch my mouth a bit closer.
I could be sitting
It's
at
a
home
wonderful
right now.
product, and we love it. It totally accelerates our deployment pipeline and gives us assurance that what we're shipping is what we intended to ship.
And it likes you for who you are.
Yeah, that's right.
We are
It's
so off
related
the
to
rails.
drinks after this.
I'm glad this is submitting after dark.
We started having an echo.
I blame you, Schaefer. That's usually where it comes from.
That is false.
Well, I still do.
And it's actually not.
Schaefer is moving to LA in 2 weeks, and he thinks we're going to have to make After Dark at 11 Pacific now, which I think is crazy.
That's totally insane.
Let's take a poll. We have 14 live viewers. Of the 14 live viewers, if you are in the Eastern time zone, then tell us on Twitter, @CloudFoundry, tell us that you're watching from
CFAD.
And that you want to go to sleep early because you can't hang with CFAD at like midnight.
The way this all works out is I cannot do this at 8 o'clock with a house full of kids on a Sunday night. And if we switch to that later hour, and it's the tough mutter, James, harden the fuck up here, then we can pick up London in their Monday morning, and we can
No
get
one's getting up Monday morning at 6 to watch CFAD. There's just
No, I don't mean get up to watch. I mean we can get Colin to join the hangout.
Only if it's at like midnight, bro.
yeah.
No. He already told me he would do it. He'll be on.
So we're gonna move it and wait for him, and then we're gonna be so sad.
No, we'll be fine.
So the update is the Cloud Foundry After Dark will be missing Schaefer starting from 2 weeks from now.
Schaefer has the passwords to the key.
All right, well, I got a ton of work to do, guys. I might call it a shorter one tonight. It's right at the hour, so.
This is the witching hour when you say it gets good. We didn't have any secrets either.
Secrets this week? Yeah, I don't have any secrets. A lot of our announcements were pent up before Summit, so then we kind of they all came out, and Azure and JP Morgan Chase joining, those were good juice. The Marantis reselling us was good juice, and Dell Services starting a practice around us was good juice. I'm talking to Capgemini about them building a cloud-native application practice, which I'm really excited about to really start chiseling away at core enterprise things. And I think that's pretty cool. Oh, wow. So Bridget shows up. I was literally, Bridget, just saying, well, I guess we'll call it a night, everybody. So maybe I'll drop out and let Bridget lead the discussion.
I'm not jumping in for discussion. I'm just jumping in because I figured it would be easier than tweeting. I was listening. I told Andrew earlier I was listening. I was just trying to catch up on email after Velocity. But it's already a late hangout. If we make it even later, then some of us who already find it to be late may not join as often, but that's not the end of the world. Because you might get more Pacific, like Andrew was saying, you might get more Pacific time zone people actually joining. You might get more European people. So
Here's the thing. We have I think we picked out total ever with 18 viewers on the live stream, and then we usually get 100. We're usually getting 400 or 500 a week out. We didn't do that on the Memorial Day because everyone was tired, I think, but I don't know. We'll see. We'll do what we got to do. How is Velocity, Bridget?
Velocity was
Guys,
great.
you guys.
If you want more people to listen to it, have you considered actually putting it in the iTunes store as like a downloadable podcast? Because we get like 10 times as many listens for Arrested DevOps through iTunes as we do on YouTube.
Look at that. I don't know. I mean, honestly, we weren't trying to maximize the listeners. We kind of wanted it to be a thing where if you want to find it, you do, and maybe that helps a bit. Because I think you put a lot of stuff in. I don't know. It's really about quality of listener as well, right?
I don't know. Velocity was good. Velocity was great. It was not the same without you, Andrew.
Well, that happens. What did you think of the OODA loop? What did you learn about the OODA loop?
I went to Barron's talk. There was lots of stuff from the goal in it.
There was a Niels talk was the one I was talking about.
Oh, yeah, that's right. And Neil's talk was the OODA loop one. Barron's was a different thing. And Neil's talk was good. I enjoyed it. What
I
I
wish
think,
you talked about the OODA loop
yeah. So what I thought was
as
interesting,
opposed to whatever it was he was calling the OODA loop, which had nothing to do with OODA. But do go on.
again, I've just been like trying to catch up on email for hours, so my brain's a little fried. But what I remember from Anil's talk is that he brought in a lot of research, not just necessarily that military dude that came up with OODA, but like some other stuff.
John Boyd.
It was actually kind of great because Allspaw is sitting next to me and he's alternately like cheering and then kind of saying, "Oh, but actually," just kind of like sub-vocalizing. So it's like, hey, this is actually engaging. This is good. So I think there's a lot to unpack in there. I haven't taken. I'm not sure if Anil has posted his slide.
So it was probably better with the Allspaw live stream, is what you're saying?
Yes, that's for sure. And
I'm not
everything's better with Allspaw.
posted his slides yet or not, and I'm not sure if I don't think like the video of anything but keynotes is out yet, but at least with the Allspaw live stream, it was pretty interesting.
So there's one thing, and then we won't over-rotate on this, but for anyone who's listening or anyone else who's on here besides Ben, you guys know what the OODA loop is? Yes?
Crickets.
You know what we're talking about, Ed?
Okay,
You want to explain it, or
I saw some tweet stuff come out about it, but nobody ever explained what it was. It's like another meaningless acronym.
okay.
well-
So Twitter's the worst for things like this because OODA is so short that nobody's going to want to explain it in 140 characters.
Right.
John Boyd was a jet fighter. And
Yeah.
The OODA loop stands for, it's basically a symbolic representation of his philosophy of how you should fight with a jet. And
It's a
then
good book on it.
kind of extended to cover all these other sort of business and other scenarios. But it stands for observe, orient, decide, and then act. And the idea, as an oversimplification, is that you're trying to go through this cycle of each of those stages, and each stage itself is important, but in the context of a competitive game where someone else is also going through that cycle, whoever can go through the cycle with the highest fidelity at each stage and then the fastest cycle time will tend to win the fight. And there's an implicit like competitive aspect to it. But yeah, it gets thrown around and probably oversimplified. One of the things I keyed off in the stream that I sort of wanted to have a conversation, but I didn't have the context, and I didn't want to just call Anil out without that context. But it seemed like it was, and many times people oversimplify that OODA just means go faster. So if he was just trying to make a counterpoint to that you don't necessarily always need to go faster, 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 or if each quality of the observe and orient steps are not whatever level of fidelity, then the decisions you make aren't going to be good, and the actions you make aren't going to be great either. So then he had a tweet, and there's like a slide or whatever where he's trying to say that you shouldn't necessarily always try to get to decide act as fast as you can. And I think that's slightly dangerous in the context of what Boyd was saying. And what I would argue, or the way I would reframe it is, and this also applies to things like the last responsible moment and some of the other things that get talked about in software development practice, is that you're actually trying to cycle through those stages very fast, but your decision based on your observations and your orientation is to wait. That's your wait action. It's not so much that you're not going faster through the cycles, but you're explicitly deciding to take no action.
I think, if I'm recollecting correctly, I think I actually tweeted something during Anil's talk along those lines, which was basically that you don't have to act. Like, you can decide, and then the decide is that you're not going to act.
Well, no op is an action, I guess, is the best way to frame it.
Yeah, I mean, the word is decision. right?
Right.
And then the action is based on that, right? And you have to. The whole point of the OODA loop, and I thought, was that your environment and your ecosystem around you is constantly shifting and moving, and that's the whole point of continually doing it at. And I always heard of doing it at a cadence, not necessarily to your point, trying to do it faster, but finding the cadence that works best for you. And maybe that decision is that of an action, and an action is the point that you're maintaining the cadence, even though everything else around you may be chaos.
So this is interesting when you talk about a cadence, and this is the way John Boyd framed it, and also if you start to read a lot of Bruce Lee, he talks about interrupting people's rhythm, right? And so if you have a predictable cadence that you're going through this, what John's trying to do is get you to disrupt the other person's cycle, right? It's not just about going through these things. When you frame it as a competitive game, you're actually trying to get inside the other person's OODA loop and disrupt it. And that sort of changes it. It's not just because without that competitive aspect, then it starts to look suspiciously like Toyota Kata or any of these other sort of improvement processes that you cycle through. It's the explicit competitive aspect that someone else is also going through those cycles, and their mission is to mess up your life. Then it kind of reframes the game. It's not just about the cadence. It's about that cadence in relation to not just how fast you can go through it, but how fast you can go through it and maintain the fidelity of each of those stages.
Right.
Meanwhile, someone's trying to do that same thing back to you.
Yeah, I know those people.
Looking at what I tweeted during Anil's talk, I'm being reminded that what he was specifically, when he said it is not clear at all that it's uniformly better to go faster at everything, he was specifically talking about the benefits of delaying decisions.
But I saw this slide and it said that sort of thing. But you're not actually delaying the decision. You're deciding to get more information, right? And what you're deferring is an action that's not wait. So you're still going back through the cycle. Anyway, it's a little mini bike shed. But if you're into OODA loop and Boyd, I think the opposite is just as bad or worse, which is oversimplifying it to go as fast as you can. And that I think that actually probably causes people more problems than telling them that they should wait. So as a counterpoint, I definitely, and I always enjoy Anil's perspective in talks anyway, but I think that it's at least, and maybe I spend way too much time thinking about this kind of nonsense, but the OODA loop is very, very nuanced and deep, and to just kind of oversimplify it as go faster, or sometimes you should wait, is a lot more. You're just leaving a lot of nuance and perspective on the table.
Right. So what you're saying is wait is a decision, and then you're going back through your loop.
Exactly. Wait is that you're deciding to do nothing so that you can observe and orient, so that you can get back to the decision, and then based on whatever's going on. And this is also like if you think about competitive sword fighting. If you read a lot of the samurai stuff, and Bruce Lee talks about this too, the person who moves first is the one that dies. And it doesn't always play out that way. But there's an aspect of the commitment, that initial commitment that someone makes to attack you, gives you the opening to kill them.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Unless it's a feign.
Well, then you didn't read them right?
So, Andrew, you're thinking that you want this at 11 p.m. Pacific?
I'm going to live in the Pacific time zone, and 8 o'clock with a house full of kids.
Oh, yeah, that doesn't work for sure.
Not going to work for my house.
Yeah, 11 p.m. Pacific might work better on a Saturday night, is all I'm thinking. Because, that's 1 a.m. Central. I can have a pretty much 100% guarantee of never being awake on a hangout at 1 a.m. Central.
Then it'll be Cloud Foundry after drinks.
You know what I'm saying? I got work in the morning, dude.
You got to figure it out. I don't know. I have a fun time, and I think these are worthwhile topics to discuss with a group of people, and we'll figure out how to keep doing it. But logistics are going to be different if I live 3 time zones away from where I live right now.
Heck yeah. But you know, the kids are in bed at what, 9:30, 10?
If I'm lucky.
You have energetic children, Andrew.
I always know 11 is good, but 10 is iffy. We'll see.
Here's hoping.
So anything else anyone wants to add? Any other thing that stood out at Velocity this year, or you're excited about?
There were some really good keynotes. Laura Bell did a really good security one. Astrid Atkinson did a really good engineering for the long game. She's been at Google for a decade. So there's she made a point about how since you can't predict the future, you should try to make choices where you think you can live with the consequences, because you probably will. Let's see. I think overall it was a slightly different flavored Velocity, and I'm not sure if that's because it was a little earlier in the year or because there were significant people who just weren't there.
Well, they also explicitly changed the way that the whole track and the selection thing was set up too. So that probably
Yeah,
that
I don't know. Since I was on the program committee this year, and so I had actual duties. So yep.
Cheers.
It was different. I was like introducing people for tutorials and whatever. So I don't know. It's hard to compare. You can't compare apples to apples, right? It's not the same.
I love the Velocity Tribe, and this is the first one I missed in the U.S., so I felt a little bit bad. But I'm packing up this house to move to Los Angeles, and hopefully I'll make the New York one, and we'll see. I actually told, this is a secret, sort of a secret.
Oh, are we to the secrets part?
It's not a Cloud Foundry secret, but I told Courtney basically a year ago, after the last Velocity, that O'Reilly should get rid of Velocity as a brand.
Hmm.
That they should break it apart into all the constituent things, all those themes should be their own conference. And then after a few years, because here's what's happening, like as Velocity's changing for a variety of reasons, then people start saying, oh, well, it doesn't feel like the old Velocity, right? It doesn't feel like the same thing. And so you're gonna basically stop that because you're gonna get rid of it.
Hmm.
And then you have each of these other things stand alone. You have like a more pure web ops conference. You can have all these other pieces kind of be, and I believe most of them would warrant their own events.
Mm-hmm.
Then you wait like 3 years and you bring it back. then you can like make it sort of like the phoenix from the fire and bring back a little bit, because that way people aren't worn out on the brand.
I mean, that certainly is one approach. It looks like they're doing a little bit of some stuff different right now anyway, like they have the business day stuff on the first day.
But that's actually what the point I'm making is like it changes the feel and it changes the brand, where if you had a business conference that was just standalone and like justified itself that way, then no one would be able to give you like anything other than like that's an awesome conference. Like it didn't feel like you changed this thing that existed into something else. It felt like its own thing that was awesome.
But everything is always going to change anyway.
Indeed. So
and on that
with that word of wisdom, we'll thank everyone who made it. We're the last people standing.
Yeah.
The last woman standing. And we'll call it a good night.
Good night.
Till next time.